Hello, and welcome to Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. In each episode of the show, we hear the insightful confessions of a successful leader who wants to inspire others to live their professional and personal dreams. I am always keen to hear your feedback, particularly in relation to the kinds of leaders you would like me to invite onto the show in future. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rich insights from our special guest. Hello and welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader, hosted by me, Andrew Tallents, the self-coaching expert. I'm delighted that Satendra Singh has joined me in the studio today. Satendra, welcome.
Thank you, Andrew. Great to be here with you.
I'm looking forward to hearing your story today. I'm sure the audience is as well. But before we get into that, just introduce yourself and where your current focus is today.
Well, who am I is an interesting question. I'm basically an engineer by background. But if I go a little bit into my initial childhood and where do I come from? So I grew up in a remote part of India in a family of teacher. My father was a school teacher. Actually, he was a principal of the school where I studied. Eldest of the three siblings. Did my initial many years of schooling in the same place where my father taught. Had very, very good childhood, a lot of good memories. And being the elder kid in the family, I was the pampered one, of course. I had those let's say, benefits of being the eldest. After my schooling in my village, I went on to do the engineering in electronics at State Government College in India. I did electronics engineering, and I often wonder how did I end up with electronics. And it was very simple decision making. Decision making was, that's the most popular stream of engineering, and that definitely has the highest chance of getting the job after I'm done with the education. So, which was one of the targets of getting educated, right? Being from a family of teacher, I obviously have had early exposure to certain values, certain traits. But maybe before I talk about what I learned, I would talk about my father, who was someone who was very well respected, very hardworking, and very high on ethics. A person who was on a mission to educate every kid he got in touch with, not only the kids in his school, but anybody and everybody who he would talk. His 90% of discussion would be about, hey, what are you doing at your studies, and etc., etc., etc. Because his belief was very strong that the best way you can help individual, in this case kid, be ready for the future is to help them get a very good education. So that's where I come from. And now I live in Gurgaon, which is, let's call, suburb of Delhi, very close to Delhi. I'm married. I have two boys, both grown up, working. And my lovely wife, she's a management graduate, but she decided not to work because she was very passionate about how she wants to bring the family. And she's been very successful at that, I would tell you. So our kids have grown to be very fine professionals, both of them working now. But that's about me, Andrew.
Super. And really appreciate that background context as well, which we'll go into in a moment. But obviously you're a hard worker. You've been very successful, which is why you're on the show. We'll come to that later on in terms of obviously the role you have now. But when you're not working, it's very important to have that balance, to be able to have that mental well-being, to be able to re-energize for when you come back to work. So what do you do to switch off or to have a different kind of balance when you're not working?
That's so everyone has their own style, right? What energizes you or what kind of refreshes you. So I am basically a 9 o'clock guy. So there are lots of people who are early morning, they start working, and I'm somebody who starts working at 9 o'clock in the morning. Whichever time zone, traveling, not traveling, that's my first preference. And the reason is because I like to kind of start my day a bit different. Not that I get up late. I get up typically 5:30, but I have my morning newspaper and stuff. But I'd like to normally spend an hour to hour and a half on myself, which basically means either simply walking, jogging, or playing badminton with my neighbors and friends. We have a group of people who we play with, so that's my energizer for the day, ahead of me, and like, for the 24 hours. So that's how I kind of keep myself, I call it, one of my focus areas now is to make sure I'm staying healthy. And you stay healthy, you are physically healthy, mentally healthy, and you are productive at work as well and in the life. So so that's one of the things. And then in the evening, I typically like to sit down after I'm done with the day's work. I'd like to sit down with my wife, because it's two of us now, most of the time at home, and watch some, let's say, TV. So a little bit of that and a little bit of reading. I like reading a lot of successful business leaders, how they did what they did, and so on. So I like reading autobiographies and watching stories about them.
What's the most interesting book that you've read most recently that stuck with you?
Quite many of them. I think, if I talk about I mean, it's not exactly the latest, right?
Yeah.
There are a few things which stay in your mind, right?
Yeah.
So there is this book, Think Again, right? By Adam Grant. So that's one thing which I read some time ago. Read Hit Refresh of Satya Nadella. And when I say which is the one which is staying in my head, Hit Refresh. I mean, the way he transformed the organization. And there are a lot of things in there, but the theme is around the culture, around the people, around making them believe that they can change and transform the organization from the stage it was. I wouldn't be a judge of what it was, but then the way he has transformed the organization in last 10 years from 2014 till 24 is like phenomenal. So so that's the one which would be my first top of the mind. And there are many others, but that's the one which is very contextual and very, I would say, fresh in my mind.
Well, it's good to hear the way that you start your day. There'll be many that are listening to this that get up at 5:30 and just get straight onto the email and into their day. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that comes to us as we become a bit more mature in our lives, as we do look after our own health in that sense. So let's go back to the child. I'm really interested in that. You obviously grew up in a very stable environment, but in a rural community, and that's got its own feel to it in terms of how, neighbors look after each other in that sense. And you had this very strong role model of your father in terms of the education piece. So just talk to us a little bit about when you went then into your first work environment, having got your studies completed. What was your leadership style like then in terms of leading self and the way that you managed yourself in relation to career, but also as you started to supervise others? What was it about your childhood and upbringing that determined that leadership style?
So there was one thing very interesting, an interesting episode which I almost always talk about. My dad was he was a teacher, very hardworking, very focused. And I remember when I was in grade 9. So I used to be good at studies, frankly. I wasn't as good at sports. So there were two things I used to do when I was a kid, apart from usual childhood things. One is go to school, study, and second is play cricket, like all millions, hundreds of millions of people in India do, right? Everyone in India plays cricket. I wasn't any good at cricket, but I was good at studies. When I came to grade 9, one day my dad called me and he said, "Let's talk." I was like, "What's going on here?" Because he was a man of few words, and my mom used to typically be kind of helping me with the homework and studies and so on. But he would help me in certain areas like maths and all. And then he said, "You know what, son? We have taught you so far, but now that you are in grade 9, and I'm economics," he was economics teacher. "So I don't think I'll be able to help you as much as I was able to do, or your mom was able to do. Now it's up to you." what what a smart way to motivate me. I was like very young, right? Grade 9. And and wow, I can't forget it. He did two things. One, he reminded me that it's something important to continue to study, even though he and my mom will not be supporting. But very importantly, he made me, in that one sentence, he just said this much in Hindi, of course, because that's our mother tongue. And he shifted my thinking to taking that responsibility very seriously. I took it to my heart, saying that, okay, now that dad has given me this responsibility, in a way, it was like, now it's yours, right? Ball is in your court. And I was like, I need to ensure that I do well, if not better than what I could have done with the help, but I definitely do as well as, I would have done with his help. And I took it very seriously. And of course, I did reasonably well. But that's something which kind of taught me how to take responsibility. And with my own ability as a child those days, I would pay extra attention to the subjects in the class. I would come back and study harder, maybe a little more than what I would have done otherwise, to make sure that I am kind of making him proud. It was more about making him proud, frankly, because he gave me the responsibility. It wasn't as much about me, yes, little bit, but more about like, I got the responsibility. I got to prove that he is right. I got to make sure that I keep his trust. So that was my first leadership lesson. And frankly speaking, I don't think I can emulate him even today. It's how he did it, I have no idea even today, but he did it. I tried to do a little bit of that. I try to make sure that people know very clearly what they are accountable for and where I am in or where I'm not in. But that's one of the most important things which I would remember. Second thing, again, still from the early on, this is like a couple of years later when I was still in the college. And, I knew it in a way because I saw him working very hard. But he told me one day that, son, it's okay. Everyone wants to succeed. And I know you want to succeed and you want to do very well, come out on top. But the most important thing is, at the end of the day, are you able to tell yourself that I have tried everything, irrespective of the outcome? I have made all the efforts, and that I have put in my best efforts, and that I did everything which is right. So, two things: I did my best and I did what was right. So that's the other two things which stayed with me, and I kind of practice even today. That at the end of the day, I can go back home and sleep comfortably because I try to do everything what is right. And if I did something which is not right, I go back and fix it. Because eventually the endeavor is to make sure that you did what is right. So those are the three things which I would say have influenced my professional life. And this is what I inherited. This is where I started. I have evolved over the years. A lot of things have changed, but these three things have absolutely remained constant.
I love that. And we'll come back to the journey in a moment in terms of how those things have changed. But let's go back. And I don't know what the answer to this question is. It's different for everybody. But even though you're growing up in that safe environment and you had those values instilled in you that have stayed with you today, what was the earliest time that you can remember where you had some kind of dream about what you wanted to do with your life? Obviously, it wasn't going to be cricket. But in terms of what your life was going to be like, what was the earliest age you can remember dreaming about?
Well, early on in life, I think uh, if I talk about my context, right? I'm talking about, I was in school in 81, 82, 85. I did my schooling, and then I went to the university. So at that point in time, I think in India there were three professions. Typically, you would become engineer, a doctor, or a chartered accountant. These were the three successful professions. You could do many other things. If you were from business family, you could run the business. You could do many other things. But if you said you wanted to be someone who says, "Look, I have done well in life," you would be one of these three. So, so this was pretty early on decided. Almost, I was the first engineer in my family, and my dad had always this. He was a teacher. He looked upon engineers as very successful people. So he was like, that could be a good place to go. So that's how I started. And yeah, I think I continued with that. But the thing for me was I wanted to be someone who does things better than others, someone who succeeds at whatever he takes up. So that was my major desire, to be a successful professional. But being an engineer was very early on, and then engineer I became.
Excellent. And I'd love in this chat as well, Satendra, to understand a bit more about the drive of engineers generally, because as you know, having worked amongst many engineers, there's a really lovely DNA with engineers in terms of trying to make sure things are always right. So we might come back to that. So let's talk about your 20s and maybe early 30s. What was the main lesson you were learning about? You had these values, you were, being very driven, you wanted to succeed, be the best that you could be, but you also had to lead people.
Yep.
And sometimes they don't behave as you want them to behave, even though you have the strong values. So what was a major lesson for you in your 20s and early 30s around?
So I became a supervisor, let's use that word, very early on. So 3 years on, and I became a supervisor of a team, like five of us, me and four more colleagues, right? Not much different, all of us in 20s, little bit here and there. The leadership style there was simple. We were all a part of the team, and we were all pushing each other, trying to intellectually and trying to, as a professional, compete. So somebody is doing something, I'll do something else, and we learn and collaborate and so on. So very easy, not too difficult. It was about individual excellence still, even though I was a, let's say, leader. But five people, we were like more like a family. We were sitting inside the same office, talking to each other, having lunch together. So a little bit of different than supervisor or manager and employee kind of thing. My lesson in leadership came when I became a quality head in a factory. So I had six engineers working with me and about 35 more people. So a team of about 40, 41 people. And till then, I was doing a lot of things myself. Like I said, I was a supervisor, but I wasn't actually a supervisor because we were all in it together. And here I had to do a little bit of administrative things. And also I had to kind of do my job, but also ask somebody else to do things. So I learned my first lesson there. I wasn't initially. I did not do any management education, so I didn't know many things like all the management jargons. Those no. So I learned my lesson in delegation by practice. So I remember still, and this was one of my guys who taught me this actually, literally. I remember I gave some assignment to one of my colleagues. In my mind, I said I'll take an hour to do it, and I say okay. 2 hours later, I say okay, where are we? And whatever that person did was kind of was like wasn't anywhere. And then I was like, what's going on, guys? And it was like a couple of times already happening. The the lesson there. So after peeling few onions, then finally he said, you know what? We have figured out that you anyway expect very high quality and high standards from us, which takes us a little longer than you. So anyway, we know that if you have told us 2 hours later, you want it 2 hours later, and you will, if we don't do it, you will anyway do it yourself. That was a very interesting lesson for me. It hit me very hard. And then I realized, okay, first thing is I need to understand his context. Because I told him to do something now, that doesn't mean that the person is starting right away, because the person has many other things probably, even though that person is a part of my team. So I need to understand the context. I need to understand the capability, and I need to plan better. Instead of expecting him to plan everything to my expectations, I need to plan better so that the person has good time, and I should probably explain him better than what I was doing so far. So, and also allow myself a little bit of flexibility, not to get in a situation wherein I need to roll up my sleeves and do it every time myself, because then I'm becoming six into one, and the six people I have are not being used. So that was my first lesson in leadership, honestly. And then onwards, I try to ensure that I plan a bit better. I try to ensure that I'm giving people time to do their things, and make sure I delegate a lot better. Nowadays, sometimes I'm probably a little more, I give them a lot more time. And sometimes, people say, hey, you know what, we already did it way ahead. So that's another side of the story.
Absolutely. I'm loving listening to the story and hearing a really good thread here going through. So let's move into maybe early 30s to late 30s and you developing as a human being, as a leader, and obviously, I'm guessing, potential family and around that kind of thing. So just talk to us about those years.
Yeah. So there was one more, which is a context of this taking responsibility part, which I was saying. So I kind of would say this way, that I took the responsibility too seriously sometimes, and which actually meant that I became very goal focused, which I am even today. I'm very target focused, and I set on something and I try to ensure that I achieve it. I mean, because it's not me anymore anyway, by the way, it has to be we. So me and my team, we have to, because I set not goals for myself, I set for the whole organization I run or have been running in the last years. So as a team, whatever goals we set, I mean, I'm very focused on that. At some point in time, I think I became too serious about this, achieving the goals. And the outcome of that was slightly different, in the sense like I became very aggressive. Typically you would use these two words, aggressive and assertive, right? So I became very aggressive because I wanted everything done now. Let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. It was good when it is done, but the journey to doing it was sometimes difficult. I remember, again, I learned it from a colleague, and I have told him, he probably forgot about this. I've told him a couple of times. I said, remember, you did something. So one day this colleague walked into my office and he says, hey, I need to talk to you. And he was actually reporting into me. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? And he's like, what exactly is your end objective? I mean, he used it in Hindi. What's your end objective? I said, what do you mean? And it's like very comfortable, calm conversation, because, we were sitting, two of us. And it's like, then he explained to me, saying that, sometimes you are making it difficult. And that was something which stayed again in my mind, to adapt my style, because I actually talk very straight. My persona is basically, I talk very straight. I don't kind of go, uh, you know I'm not exactly a diplomatic person, let's put it this way, right? I go very straight. Okay, let's do this. Here is how I think. What do you think? Let's go fix it. And he's like, you can still do everything you want to do, but you don't have to be as super fast and as super aggressive. So that's another thing which I learned, that you got to make sure that team is feeling comfortable. And then of course I learned even further about the people. Now I have very clear belief. I have evolved. This is about people, end of the day. So I have adapted my style now. Now I have very strong belief that it's all about the people. So I spend a lot of time knowing the people. Whenever I take new role, I kind of, because I have taken many new roles in my different assignments. Even like, for example, in Nokia, I was 15 years. In 15 years I did 5 or 6 very different roles, and hundreds of people changed in my teams, right, in different times. So I spend a lot of time understanding the people, because as a team we are as good as all of us together, and we need to work together. And as a leader, it's my job to ensure that I get the best out of every resource I have at my disposal. So I spend a lot of time knowing the people, knowing the team. Sometimes, on a lighter side, I always say sometimes I know more about them than they know about themselves. But just to kind of make a point, it can't be anyway the case. But I spend a lot of time knowing the people. But that, going back to the point, it was about making sure that I'm assertive, but shifting from aggressive to assertive and still achieve the same objectives. Then other thing which I learned in the same thread, as I was transitioning from, this was around the same time, transitioning from an individual worker to a supervisor to a manager of large team, because by now I had a couple of hundred people in my extended team. It was all about surrounding myself with people who are smarter than me. But that's one thing which happens often, that managers tend to want to be the best person in the room. That unfortunately is not the reality. It should not be the case. It can be, but then you have a bigger problem as a leader, because if you are the smartest person in the room always, then you don't have the right kind of leadership team, because then you're not harnessing the collective brain power of the people, or you're not increasing the intellectual ability or collective ability of the team which you are working with. So you got to have a lot more people who are smarter than you on many different subjects. I may know a little bit about everything, but if I talk about, let's say, procurement, I mean, my CPO knows a lot more than I do. And I need to be comfortable with the fact that he knows a lot more than me. Instead of trying to tell what to do, I mean, I should be comfortable with that. So that's another thing which I learned, that I need to focus on when I build a leadership team. I need to focus on bringing people who are better than me on a few aspects minimum. So I do that all the time. So that would be another thing I would probably talk.
Thank you for sharing that, Satendra. And what I want to move on to now is what you've experienced more recently in your career, and it's what a lot of CEOs and leaders experience as they mature. And you've been talking a lot about your journey from supervisor to management to leader and what that involves in terms of managing downwards. You've obviously got some complex stakeholder relationships where you currently are. And as a CEO or a leader, we always have those. It could be suppliers, customers, supply chain, investors, doesn't matter who it is. Once they're there, it means the CEO has to spend time in those relationships because that's where they need to be, as well as lead the team. So just talk to us about that transition in your life in terms of how you've managed that and still managed to be efficient and effective once you've got complex stakeholder relationships to manage as well.
Yeah. One thing is for sure, which I have read many times and I have experienced now, and all of us have experienced, that it's very lonely at the top. I have been into the country head position for almost like 20 years now in different roles. So I was a functional head in the country. So I had nobody in the country to report to or whom I can go and talk to and say, okay, let's talk something. So it becomes very lonely at the top. One has to be always looking out for feedback. One has to be always looking out for information. And one of the things which I have done is I try to get up from my desk or get up from my seat and go somewhere and talk to somebody. So I try to go into the work, wherever the work is happening, as using the Japanese term, go to the Gamba. So Gamba could mean factory. When I was the factory head, I used to go talk to the factory people. When I was doing global strategy role, Gamba could mean talking to different stakeholders in different geographies, different time zones, different business segments, because I was responsible for supply network strategy across multiple segments. So talk to every possible stakeholder and listen to them. Seek out the feedback because it doesn't come automatically. It actually doesn't come at all. You can try as much as you want unless you voluntarily and very actively seek feedback, it doesn't come to you. So I would be going and talking to the stakeholders all the time, talking to the colleagues as well. So linking up from the stakeholders to the people responsible for delivery and the people supporting the delivery, right? There are three different elements here. We need to talk to all of them and make sure somehow our priorities are aligned. So spending time going to the Gamba, whatever it meant. Gamba in today's context for me means I go talk to the customers. Gamba for me, I go visit the factories. I have 15 factories in my current organization. I have customers across 20 countries. I have several hundred customers, almost 9,000 people in the organization, and the board, of course. It means going and talking to everyone, seeking opportunity to talk to everyone as much as practically possible. So I have found my ways to actively seek information from them. And most importantly, I try to listen to what is not being said. Everyone listens to what is being said. I try to interpret what is not being said. Because that's, I have found most of the time very meaningful when I try to put the threads together and say, okay, this is what it means. So, because sometimes with so much of information flowing to me and all of us at our different levels, there's so much of data, so much of information is flowing. You got to be able to get out from it and have a look at the macro trend. What's macro picture of the business? What's macro picture of the customer relationships? Or what's the macro picture of the people at large? So to be able to go from, let's say, very detailed micro level to the macro level is another thing which I think is something which I every now and then do and say, okay, what is it? What does it mean?
Super. And I picked up there about this loneliness, and it's very true. It's something I hear a lot. in my work. So what advice would you give to those leaders out there, wherever they are, whatever stage they are, where they're experiencing that loneliness and it's starting to affect them negatively? What advice would you give to them how to move out, also really start coping with that loneliness?
Well, I would say first thing is don't be afraid to listen to any feedback. Least of, and most importantly, or least of all, do not ever react to a negative feedback. Because person who's giving you a feedback, especially if it's negative or something for improvement, say thank you, take it wholeheartedly, because that person all the time has your good at heart. Is a person who's trying to help you and help the organization or the team or the family to improve from where they are. So seek out the feedback as much as possible. Another thing I forgot in the initial comments I was making is never be afraid to fail. In fact, maybe I'll take a detour from here. I'll talk about something which I practice very dearly ever since I have started hiring leaders. Because I typically tend to hire leaders now who are leader of leaders or leader of leader of leaders. Is my most important question of the interview when I interview anyone is, tell me about the biggest setback you have. Tell me what you learned from it. Tell me how did you come out of it, and how are you managing similar situations now? This is the most important question, because for me, leaders are, yes, some people might say they are born leaders, but I am a believer that you become a better leader and you become a leader as you go through the experience. And there is no better teacher than failure for anything, and most importantly for leader. So as a leader, if you are watching out for successes, everyone wants to succeed. There are always things which you are not doing as well as you would have wanted to do it. Some people recognize it, some don't. Some failures go unrecognized, some failures don't. But please pay attention to your failures, keep them too close to yourself and learn from it, and never ever be afraid to talk about it. Because I like to give examples of failures as to what have we done, because that gives people confidence. Of the second point which I'm going to make is, almost always I have found out that people underestimate themselves, whether it's a leader or it's an individual. Because of few things I learned early on in my career from my bosses. One of my bosses, way early on when I became just the supervisor, I was telling you, the first time supervisor, he was very fond of throwing anything for good. He will give a target, Satendra, let's do this. And I was like, how the heck would I do it? And I was almost always like, not possible. I said once or twice to him, and then later on I realized, he told me, he says, it's okay, let's try. And I was able to do it. I have had same experiences with everyone in my team, almost everyone, wherein people surprise themselves with the things which they have done. They think it's not possible. I'll give you an example actually in my previous assignment. In our manufacturing process, there is a certain quality matrix. Benchmark in our world that time was 2 ppm for a certain process. I wouldn't go into details for confidentiality reasons. For a certain ppm, there was a benchmark of 2 ppm. And I heard about it and I came back to my guys and I said, guys, this is fantastic. This another team of ours have done it. How about us taking a target of 1? And you know the reaction, right? My own reaction would be, are you out of your mind? Right? Pretty much. And believe me, 6 months later, team came back and said, you know what? Do you know what have we done? And I really did not know at that point. And he says, look, we have beaten this benchmark. What you had asked us to do, which is they have gone to 1. So there's several examples I can quote. If you can, as a leader, explain to the team, give them certain examples, and of course, it comes over time that they believe in themselves and their team is always able to exceed whatever they thought was possible. So don't be afraid of failure. Thereby, don't be afraid of setting targets which are seemingly impossible. And the last thing which I would say is being vulnerable. It goes back to the point I was making, which is Don't try to be the smartest person in the room. Likewise, it's okay to be wrong. As a leader, you have an opinion, voice it. You are wrong, it's okay. And actually, if you are wrong, go tell the people, yeah, hey, thank you, you were right. And thank you for helping me do that or helping us do that. That motivates the team, and also it grounds your own self, reminds you that you are not always the best person in the room. So that's how a few things I would say basically.
Thank you. We've got time for two more questions, Satendra. And these are a bit more personal, if you don't mind. So the first question I have is, if you think about once you've stopped working, whenever that may be, and we don't know when that's going to be in the future, many years from now, what is it that you want to be known for as a human being? What's the legacy that you're going to be leaving behind?
The closest thing to me is, am I able to help someone become better? I'm very proud of something which I have achieved. Oh, no, I have not achieved. Actually, my colleagues have achieved. So there are a few, like I said, I spend a lot of time understanding the people. That means I try to find who are people who have highest potential, and where somebody needs help, I try to help them. I try to help them become better version of themselves. I try to give them the opportunities which they wouldn't get if I was not supporting them, which means basically give them challenging assignment, stand by their side. I don't micromanage people anymore. In fact, sometimes I stay too far away. I just say, okay, let's do this, and then leave the person to do what the person needs to do. But I allow them to try, allow them to make their mistakes. I wouldn't say fail, because I'm standing by and trying to help them and see them succeed. So what I would like to be known is as a person who has helped some people. Every now and then when I have some conversation and somebody reminds me, hey, do you remember you helped me there on that problem or that difficult moment, whatever it was. So that's what I would like to be remembered as. Did I help some people? If answer is yes, I'm the happiest person.
Super. And the final question, Mitch, much more about you, because I'm taking now what you said about your morning routine, that before you get into work at 9 o'clock, it's about me time, which is really important around energizing. So with that in mind, I want to assume that you have finished working and you've got your own health and you've got choices in life about how you spend that time. What's the one thing that maybe you've not done in life that's a personal thing? It might be a skill, an experience, maybe traveling, that you've not done yet that you choose to do when you have that freedom to do it.
I have, yeah, I have an item which still I need to do. I need to learn how to play golf. I have learned, I know how to swing, but I don't say I know how to play golf. So that's when I have little extra time, that would be my first item on the list to attack. Yes.
Super. And I can tell you I'm a golfer, and it's a lifetime of learning itself. So I'd love to hear more about that when you do get the time for that. Well, Satendra, it's been lovely to have you on the show today. I know that everyone listening to this and watching this on YouTube as well would have learned something about the importance of that really early lesson around delegation, the importance of recognizing when we're driven, we can come across as aggressive and probably need to be just more assertive in terms of with clear focus. And this thing about recognizing that people can actually do more if they're given the opportunity, the confidence, the backing of the leader, they can achieve many things they didn't think possible. So all of those lessons have been lovely today, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for having me and allowing me this opportunity to share my journey. I would close with saying to every leader out there who's listening that remember, leadership is about the context. It's the context you are in, it's the business situation, it's the people you're working with, and it's the overall ecosystem around you. So it's all about the context. Recognize the context and find your own way to leadership, your own style of successful leadership. But thank you very much, Andrew, for having me on this podcast.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Confessions of a Successful Leader. You can access all previous episodes of the show at confessionsofaSuccessfulLeader.com. If you are interested in finding out more about conscious leadership and self-coaching, just type in Andrew Tallents into LinkedIn or your favorite browser, and you'll find my contact details and all the content that you need. Until next time, don't forget to stay present, curious, and above all, conscious.